our Planning and Development Committee agenda is a approval of the regular minutes of July 11. Could I have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay. Bobby points out to me on the last page or on the last sentence of the minutes, committee voted to unanimously, 5-0, continue the discussion to the September, to the, I don't know what was, but the correction is to September 12, 2011 meeting. So if you just note that in your minutes. All right, so with that correction, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. First item for consideration is approval of recommended home funding for Neighborhood Stabilization Program 2, that's the NSP 2 program, property located at 1509 Emerson. This is a matter of where we're going to subsidize the rehab of this property, which is a 3-unit property at 1509 Emerson, with some home funds that we have available for this purpose. So can I have a motion?
Move second.
Who moved approval?
Judy.
Okay. Judy moved approval, and Alderman Holmes seconded. All right. Any discussion? Alderman Holmes, is this in your ward?
Yes, it is.
Would you like to say anything about this?
Well, I just think this is a good use of the funds that we can get this property done. It's been vacant for quite some time, and it's 3 units, so it's really good to have it.
One of the things that I noticed on this, that, you know, it's a 3-bedroom units, correct?
Yes.
But it's only going to have 1 bathroom. And it just seemed to me that we're spending all this money, and this is an enormous amount of money, by the way, for the renovation of this property, I believe, per square foot. But why are we not looking at another bathroom or a half bathroom? I mean, it just, you put people in there that qualify for a 3-bedroom, they need another bathroom.
Maybe that's something that we could talk
Would
to
you
Richard
encourage them with all this money? Really, this money is way more than I even think is, you know, I can't imagine spending this kind of money for it. I would think it comes to about $360,000, I think, per unit when you add up all the funds. We could buy these families a beautiful condo unit for this money, but they need another bathroom. Otherwise, I think our staff ought to take a look at the plans for this house, these units. So,
I'm sure that look over. I'm looking for Don. I'm sure that we could ask them if that's, especially a half bathroom. I certainly understand that, but if we could get a half, if not a whole bathroom, that's reasonable. If there's floor space, I guess that's what we really have to look at and see if it's possible.
Well, then it shouldn't be. We shouldn't be paying $365,000 per unit if there isn't space for a bathroom.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. I think it almost appears as though this isn't our money. Let's spend as much as we need. We don't care how we're spending it. You can look in the paper and see exquisite units in the city of Evanston right now in that area. You can find them much cheaper, but for $360,000, you can find some really fabulous, very large units with 2 bathrooms in perfect condition. So just saying that, and I'm trying to send a message to Brinsher on this.
I wonder. I'm trying to remember. This is a house. It looks like sort of like a castle in the front, but I can't remember if there's a back porch. Isn't there a back porch? So maybe I'm thinking that the Brinsher could be creative and come up with some bathroom space.
Well, you can't, unless you add on to the house. Like you say, if there's a back porch, maybe. But the point is, does anybody, I guess really what I'm getting to, does anybody do they consult with anybody about what makes sense? Or here's a building, let's rehab it, we don't care what it costs as long as we can get the money. And Sarah, I know you don't know the answers to this, you can't possibly know. I mean, what goes through their minds?
Actually, Sarah Flax, Housing and Grants Administrator for the City of Evanston. Actually, the per unit subsidy is $274,000 per unit approximately for the whole project. And yes, we will look at whether or not adding a half bath or another bath is possible. There is a porch. We have to take that down. Actually, it's structurally a nightmare. There are some real issues with the property as a whole. It is, I think a gut rehab is a nice way of putting it. It really has a lot of work that needs to be done. But we will look at adding another bath if that's feasible, and any way we can do that.
The numbers I saw were higher than what you just said. I mean, there's a calculation sheet within the heart of the documents, and I saw more than 200. But let's say it is only 265,000 per unit. You know, I mean, you could, in the 3rd ward, the 7th ward, 6th ward, definitely in the 8th ward, you can get some pretty fabulous units for that. Was any thought given to tearing this building down and starting from scratch?
Actually, it was. One of the things we do is we evaluate every property that appears to have, you know, is really needs major rehab. But it is a very large building. The total square footage is over 4,000. And when you actually calculate on a per, if you estimate maybe $220 a square foot for new construction, your construction costs for new construction come out higher even than the rehab.
All righty. Okay, any further discussion of this? I still think we ought to talk to them about this amount of money with one bathroom. It makes no sense.
We will.
All right, all those in favor of recommending approval to the council, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next item is Ordinance 61011, which amends Title 5 of the Chapter 6 of the Code, Evanston Housing Commission. It several pages of additions and subtractions to the current ordinance. Could I have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Is anybody here from the Housing Commission? No. Okay. I'm just wondering what they plan on doing, other than commenting on
Mary Ellen's
things.
gonna.
Hi, I'm Mary Ellen Poole. I'm the housing planner. I staff the Housing Commission, and I couldn't hear your question.
I just was wondering, I realized that they're going to reduce their number by 1.
Yep.
They're changing a little bit of their, I mean, we're eliminating a lot of their tasks. And I mean, the one thing it seemed that they were going to do is sort of critique policy or things like that. I mean,
What we did, we wanted to clean it up. There was some areas in there that didn't need to be included, such as the powers of city council. We don't know how it got into the Housing Commission ordinance. So it was really a cleanup. We did decrease the number back down to 9, what it was originally at. Now that we have an alderman on there, that's been taken care of to the 9. We really cleaned it up because a lot of it had to do with code and code violations, and a lot of it talked to the powers that CDBG take care of. So we think that this was just dated, and we wanted to update it to the current responsibilities of the commission.
okay. And you have a full, do you have a full commission?
We are fully
now?
staffed, or commissioned.
Fully commissioned. We know you're fully staffed.
I'm fully staffed.
All right. All right. Anything else, anybody? All right. All those in favor of, we didn't vote, did we?
No.
All those in favor of recommending this to the council, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This is for introduction only tonight. Next item is for discussion, and that is a discussion of the ordinance that we have, 38011, which has to do with licensing of rental dwelling units. And I can tell you that I can remember, just as clear as seeing you all sitting out there, the last time we discussed this. This room had 200 people in it.
So do I.
And they were screaming, right?
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Murphy, and I think they were wrong then. And so we've come back, and would you like to make a presentation?
Sure. It's Jeff Murphy, Manager of Building and Inspection Services, and I was here last time. I remember the discussions and maybe, I don't know, uproar is not the right word, but it did raise a lot of flags. We are bringing it back, though, because we feel that it's important to the city, important to the community, and I outlined it in the memorandum, which I'm just going to read quickly because it pretty much gives a really good summary of where we're at right now, and then I have a little bit to add to it in terms of numbers. The Housing Code Compliance, the actual program is called the Housing Code Compliance Program, for those that don't know. And it's designed for us to systematically evaluate Evanston's rental housing stock and address deterioration through enforcement of municipal ordinances, including the 2003 Property Maintenance Code, as adopted by the City of Evanston. We have property maintenance inspectors from the Building and Inspection Services Division, and for the last several years, actually, we've experienced an increase of demand, especially as the housing market, or as the economy has tanked. The City of Evanston currently has, I don't have the current census information, so I'm going on old information. I don't think it's changed a lot, but we have 13,486 rental dwelling units in 2,426 buildings. I know that number's off by a few. We have some condo buildings that had been, several actually in the 8th Ward, that had been converted, several from John Magic, the developer, that had gone into foreclosure and are now being reconverted to, and actually some of them already been reconverted to rental. So we have a lot more units coming back online, including some new developments. So we have a large demand for services. The cost to actually run the Housing Code Compliance Program in 2010-11, which was the last full fiscal year, was, after all expenses, $603,408. The existing rental building registration ordinance, which I'll talk about a little bit later, has raised on average every year annually about $70,000 to $80,000 in revenue, but more importantly, it has given us information on owners, how to locate them, especially in an emergency. It has reduced, to a certain extent, staff time in trying to find ownership information, but not as well as we planned, just because of the owner-occupied 2 flats who have sought the exemption of their buildings to pay the registration fees because they're either 100% owner-occupied or they're not renting out. A lot of elderly people don't rent out the second floor, but we have to spend significant staff time investigating it and monitoring it on a yearly basis. So, and this represents a lot of units. We estimate it's roughly about 2/3 of all 2 flats are owner-occupied. I could be off by a little bit, but I think I'm pretty close. So jumping down, staff does not have an effective means to address reoccurring problems other than imposing fines through administrative hearings. It's a time-consuming process. It's, for a lot of landlords, a minor slap on the wrist. We're looking for something that will actually have a little bit more, give us a little bit more leverage to essentially hold owners accountable, especially investors who are also hitting the housing market and tend to not maybe wish to spend the money they would maybe have spent 5 years ago to maintain their buildings. By joining other communities that have rental dwelling unit licensing ordinances, we're hoping to solve chronic problems in rental units that in the past sometimes have taken years, as you know, Alderman Rainey, going to circuit court and just layering on fines and not really solving the problem. Another goal is we want to be less reliant on federal funding because that's obviously a big issue. We don't know what's going to happen in the next year, and we want to be a little bit independent of anything that happens on the federal level. And also, we want to remove the burden from as I said earlier, from the owner-occupied 2 flats. They're not. Very rarely are they do we spend a lot of time addressing issues in owner-occupied two-flats? They tend to be well-maintained, and it's not worth the staff time. It's not a good use of staff time when we could be addressing the real problems that are out there, and there are a lot of problems out there. In 2010, property maintenance inspectors handled over 2,800 cases that were a combination of exterior and interior complaints, routine inspections, zoning complaints that we worked with the zoning staff on, vacant buildings. We currently have 220 vacant buildings in the city that we've pretty much devoted one of our 4 property maintenance inspectors just to monitor and on a weekly basis. The average inspector salary with fringe benefits is $35 an hour, and we currently have 4 property maintenance inspectors and 1 supervising inspector. And again, the cost of the program was $603,000. So the basis for the rental registration program that we currently have was really to maintain up-to-date residential building owner information in a database that would make it easier for clerical staff and inspectors to process their cases. And to a certain extent, it's worked. The basis for the rental unit licensing is actually, I think, significantly different. As I said, we want to be less reliant on federal funding. We want to focus on investor-owned residential properties, have a more effective means to enforce code compliance on a per-unit basis, and give staff a more effective long-term tool to use when dealing with dwelling units with chronic life safety code violations. Communities that have these programs, just to name a few, are Aurora, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Elgin, Palatine, Urbana, Mundelein, Waukegan, and Niles. We estimate that by implementing this ordinance, we would generate an additional $321,000 in addition to our lodging establishment licensing program, which we already have, using the same fee basis of $26 per rooming unit for a total of $515,000. So, any questions?
Alderman Holmes. Oh, Alderman Fisk, then Alderman Holmes. Anybody else?
I'm sorry, Jeff, I just don't understand. What are we doing with owner-occupied two-flats?
The owner-occupied two-flats wouldn't be required to be licensed, to pay a license fee of $26.
How do we keep track of them? I mean, we've had several owner-occupied two-flats where ownership has gone, one of the owners has died, and so the family takes over. The family doesn't live there and rents it out. How do we keep track of change of ownership within a family like that?
We'd still keep track of it the way we do now, actually, through transfer of ownership. We get notified of every sale from the city clerk's office.
Okay.
So we would just compare that to, our inventory if it's a rental building.
Okay. Alderman Holmes?
If there were 3 units owner-occupied, what would that mean? And only because somebody asked me that question.
So if you're saying that the occupants of each of the 3 units is an owner of the building?
Yeah, one of the occupants would be the owner, and the other 2 units would be rented out.
Then they would be licensed. They would be
They'd
required
have
to be
licensed.
licensed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us briefly how licensing units would be more productive to maintaining decent housing than registration? Give us just one example.
It's a larger hammer, but actually, let me take that back. We don't have an effective way to get housing stock that's just not really compliant in any way with the current building codes, and we can cite them for property maintenance violations, but we can't really do much more than that. They may be grandfathered in through zoning through a past zoning code, but we have a lot of units out there that are extremely questionable. that this ordinance would allow us to remove a license for.
All right, but when, okay, do you want him to finish, or do you want to go now? Okay, go now.
If I can just amplify the one point, how I think it'll be more effective, I'd call your attention to Section 5.8-4. And what we really wanted to try to do is basically put that rental owner on notice when they're filling out an application that they're aware of the three unrelated rule. They're aware of all the rules. So we're kind of making that promise and putting it in their hands so the city's not caught in the middle of between a tenant and an owner that didn't tell them anything. So I think of all the things, this is what I would propose to be the more effective approach of actually getting it in their hands. They're filling this out, and they're basically made to understand what the overall city zoning regulations, building codes, and that sort of thing. And then the only other thing is the provisions that we can get in. I think where my heart's gone out the most of all the work that Jeff's done over the last several months that I've been involved here is when owners go in there and hack up a house and it's really unsafe for any residents to move in there, let alone people that are in the basements and they can't escape except through a kitchen without any means of egress in case a fire breaks out and that sort of thing. So I think also this provides a floor layout of how they're going to rent it as part of their application, and more importantly for Jeff and his staff to do these spot checks. And then I think the third and last point I'd make, and then for repeat offenders, and I think you all have brought this up before in many ways, that if there's a repeat offender, that the city does not have an obligation to continue to issue a rental license to that particular individual for that particular unit. So those would be the three things that I would highlight.
Well, let me just follow up on that. Let's say, that's where I was going really, to the individual unit. Let's say that we then determine that this unit was not entitled to a license because of multiple violations, non-compliance, et cetera, whatever the reasons. In my ward, I'm not so sure that the overcrowding is the issue down there, but regardless, how would we have to wait till the lease was up to impose, or could we yank the license during the year? And how does that mesh with, state laws having to do with evictions or county laws having to do with evictions, et cetera?
Well, it just, if you refer to 5-8-8, it outlines the procedure of how to revoke a license. I don't know if Grant would want to explain the implication on, from the state law point of view, but essentially what this ordinance is saying is the director may revoke a license issued, and it's my understanding of how it works is a notice of revocation is sent out. It's not something where we say, in December or it's end of a school year, whatever it is. The letter goes out immediately. The owner has to respond within, I believe it's 10 days in the ordinance. And it's then a hearing is conducted actually through the city manager in accordance with procedures by the Corporation Council. So I don't know if Grant wants to chime in on that. So that's the administrative, or that's the process that would be put into place, or the shell of the process. I don't have the details of it.
But what would happen to the tenant? Could a tenant live in a unit that wasn't licensed?
No. I mean, essentially what would happen is the landlord would have to give the tenant notice, and it would have to be something reasonable, probably 30 days, I would imagine, and it would have to be done immediately, really,
we would have to amend the landlord-tenant ordinance, would we not, with some of these new rules?
Possibly, I'd have to look into that. Yeah.
Alderman Nguyen?
Well, Alderman Rainey, you were asking the questions that I was wondering about, is that how does this, what happens to the tenants in all of this, and how does that work with the landlord-tenant ordinance? And then the issue of how quickly can we revoke the license? I mean, I think that this is an excellent tool, but I want to understand the implications further on down the line for someone who might be sort of innocently, sort of innocence is in somewhat in quotes, caught up in a situation. So I think if we could get more information about how that would fit, how all of that, how this would all roll out for the tenants.
Okay, well, it wouldn't actually change what we're doing right now. This is all about life safety. Right. So if we have a situation where it's an illegal alteration, as Mr. Griffin pointed out, it's a real case actually where a basement unit was constructed and the only way out was through a kitchen, and that's a typical place a fire starts. So you're not going to get out, basically. A situation like that, there'll be a letter of revocation, but we're going to immediately address it. The tenant's going to the landlord is either going to have to find the tenant another unit. Many times the owners have multiple units available. Yeah. But if it's really nothing more than I'm searching for words, the best way to say it. I can't say it nothing more than a zoning violation because the illegal construction just by itself is questionable. We don't know how anything was done. But if it's blatantly life safety and it's clearly dangerous to the occupant, we want the occupant out. If we feel the inspectors, we would bring in building inspectors. If the electrical and plumbing inspector thought it was safe for 30 days, then that's where the 30-day notice would kick in. But it would have to be done by the landlord, not by the city. The city does not evict people. Right. It's the failure. It's the landlord essentially renting a space he shouldn't have rented in the first place.
Okay. Right. Mr. Griffin and then Judy Fisk.
That's essentially what I was going to say, is that the whole ordinance is really geared not so much for the tenant as for the individual landlord. There's a number of ways that the landlord can cure whatever issues, whether it's overoccupied zoning, building, or whatever. So tenants don't necessarily have to be evicted, and the city won't be in that eviction process. But at the end of the day, a tenant could be, or a series of tenants could be the victim, I guess, of a landlord that improperly did whatever, and that's what we're focused in on. And as you see, at the end of the day, the city manager has a right on the final hearing, kind of to weigh the egregious nature of some of the violations and basically could kind of what we did this past year is basically stay the enforcement until other things are cured. But we'll be glad to, when we bring this back for introduction, we'll have a few what-ifs for the individual tenants. But in generally, this is really focused on the landlord, making them sign and promise that this is how they're going to conduct business, and that they're aware of the very ordinances, and it's the landlord that's going to be on the hook, not so much the tenants.
The only way an ordinance like this can work is by restricting the owner's income, because nothing else matters to them. If by not licensing a unit, they're not getting income. So we have to make some provisions while that tenant is there, while the license been withdrawn, to not allow for any income to go to the landlord. But Alderman Fisk, sorry.
Mr. Griffin addressed everything I was going to say.
Well,
Yes.
I see this too as another way of addressing some of the many landlords who, or maybe they're just investors, I don't think they're good landlords, who own property throughout the city. We're meeting with one on Friday, I believe it is, where they own properties in several of our wards, and they're just not kept. They're horrible. And this is another way of addressing them. They'll have to bring these properties up to code so that people can live in a nice environment and a safe one, which they are entitled to because they're paying through their noses for them. So I see this as another way of addressing that. So it'll be beneficial to the tenant, in the end, to make sure that we have this as a protection for them.
All right, what is the plan for bringing this back?
The plan, unless there's other issues, we'll be bringing it back for introduction at a P&D committee, and we'll work with the law department and the city manager's office to kind of go through a few of these what-ifs for you with regard to the poor tenants' rights and issues and what consequences there would be with that. So unless there's other issues that you'd like us to address, we would plan to bring this back at the next available P&D committee.
Steve, I think a big issue is the way this would mesh with the landlord-tenant ordinance and the city's lease. We have a city landlord-tenant lease, the model lease. So that would all have to mesh.
So we'll probably need into September to kind of go through that, not the August. Grant's unanimous on that, too. So sometime in September.
And would we eliminate the registration program if we invoke this?
Yes, that's the whole idea.
Okay.
We would delete that rental registration ordinance from the code and adopt this.
Do you think we have every rental unit registered?
No, we don't.
Oh.
We have rental houses, rental condos. There's places going in and out.
How about traditional apartment buildings? Do you think we have all those registered?
I'd say we'd probably have right now, realistically, about 70% of them. The other 30%, we're chasing all the time.
Do you know which ones you don't have? I mean, is that a dumb question? I don't know.
No, not at all. No, we do. When we print the invoices out, the batch invoices, we can look through for any given address. Do we have the information in it? And sometimes we have LLCs that are layers and layers and layers of LLCs, and so we're chasing them. I think you're familiar with one or two that we're chasing.
Yeah. Alderman Holmes.
I'm just wondering, Mr. Griffin, as a part of this, when you're exploring in terms of what you're going to bring back, could you also look at what are the possibilities of ensuring in a lease that if people have to be displaced because of safety issues, that would be the landlord's responsibility to make sure that they were housed? I mean, we could see if that could be put in there, because, we have to think about that. I don't know if it's legal or not, and I think we'll have to ask legal to look at it, but that would certainly be another added protection for tenants.
Alderman Fisk.
It used to be, I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, that every landlord was required, even if they used a copy of a lease that they bought at the drugstore, that they were required to attach the model landlord-tenant lease to that?
That's in our ordinance.
Okay. I'm not sure that's being followed.
Oh,
and I, what? It's not? No. Of course. And I really think that the licensing is going to help because it's going to put the rules right out in front of people. But I think we need to follow along with that. And as these requirements appear in our landlord-tenant lease, they will be made available, obviously, to the tenants, even if the tenants are signing not that lease. I've seen the ones from, I don't know what the name of the company is, who produces, all sorts of legal type documents. And one of the problems that we were having when we were talking to students was that students are totally unaware of what they're supposed to do. They're kids, and I'm sure that there are a lot of other people who are a lot older than that, who really do not know what to do when they're signing a lease. They want a place to live. They feel that they're being controlled by the landlord, and they tend not to ask any questions. So I think all of this makes perfect sense to me, and hopefully will, be very helpful to those people who are looking to rent.
Those are good points, and just to address that, one of the issues that we've had, or one of the problems we've had, is that it's our understanding that verbal leases are legal in the state of Illinois, and I don't know if Grant can address that, but that's what makes the difficulty of enforcing the model lease. We've run up against that a few times, specifically at 1710 Darrow. And what Alderman Holmes brought up about being able to have money available that is actually the landlords to house for code violations, but when there's displacement, that has been a problem that we haven't in the past had an ordinance that allowed us to collect for emergency displacement. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that isn't in here, and we do need to add it.
But the ordinance doesn't say that the model lease has to be used. It just says that if it's not used, it has to be given to the tenant. Right. So it wouldn't matter whether there was a written lease or not. And besides, don't we have, with our police powers, don't we have any rights over the state law that says, you don't need a lease? Isn't that a legal issue as opposed to a local ordinance issue, and don't we supersede that? If we want to say you have to have a lease in the city of Evanston to rent rental housing, can't we order that? Can't we by ordinance?
Alderman Rainey,
Yes,
members
sir.
of the committee, Grant for our corporation counsel. I will look into this precise issue and follow up with Jeff as well. So we'll get some more information back to you. So there's always an exception out there in the ether that flummoxes us, and we're going to cut to the bottom of it.
But I don't think the big issue with rental housing in Evanston is people without a written lease. I think, that's a certain, maybe a few percentage, but I don't think that's the biggest problem we have, right?
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We'll have this. We have one speaker who would like to speak to us on an item that is up for action on the council agenda, and that is Betty Esther, who would like to speak to the home funding for NSP2. Home funding for the 1509 NSP2 building on Emerson.
No, I did not sign up for that. I signed up for PD1. I thought I put PD1.
Oh, you did. You know what? I thought it was P1. I'm sorry. Okay, so you're right on time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My name is Betty Esther. I stay at 2031 Church Street. And this has been up many times. I was here when the room was flooded. I was here when the next time when it was not so flooded. Now it's back again. Probably when it comes to action, hopefully it might be flooded again. One thing that when it was flooded and came out after that through a zoning and the people was trying to get their a building was a group of tenants from up on Central Street. They came and complained and was complaining about that they was not getting their buildings and stuff inspected, and they had a whole lot of problems and everything. And we said, well, we really don't have that many inspectors. At that time, I think we had more than 4. So now we are down to 4, and we want to change an ordinance that is going to require those 4 to be all over the place. Then you have a program that requires certain section of your community, especially those that are in the CDBG area, to be inspected every 2 years. That's so-called CDBG says, if you use my money to pay these inspectors, you got to go out and look at these places and make sure they're decent and everything. This might be a good thing if it's not, I can't see from reading it how it's going to help the tenant. All I can see is it bringing revenue to the city. And right now, the city, it does need its revenue. I'm not going to deny that. And Jeff is right when he says we don't know what the federal government is going to do and if we will be getting those funds that even to pay those inspectors from the CDBG funds. But one thing you have to think about, and you're thinking about what is going to happen to the tenant if he has to move out and there's a building with a code compliance and he's not up to stuff and the family gonna have to move. What is going to happen to the tenants when you enforce this and you set that fee and that landlord comes and says, okay, I'm gonna pay it, I don't care, I'm gonna pass this on to my tenant. Then the tenants say, well, I can't afford to live here anymore, then I move out. That happened. Or it will go to some landlords that are renting now, and one has, I know of several, that live in the CDBG area, their rents was reasonable. They stopped renting altogether because they got tired of the inspection. So what do you do when landlord says, my building stay empty? I'll pay the vacant fee. You set up the vacant building thing. Because there was a lady next door to me. Nobody, if you moved in there, you did not know the lady did not stay there. She came back once in a while to visit Evanston. When she came back, she had a place. She didn't have to go to the hotel. We passed the Vacant Building Act. Then she has to hire somebody to come and live there so she don't have to worry about having her building boarded up or worry about losing her building when before, for 10 years, nobody knew and she was doing fine. So we need to stop and look at, are we doing this? And need to be honest. We are doing this really for, we said for the overcrowdedness, and that might be a problem, but it's to gear and generate revenue. And that's something the city needs. But we need to be looking at some of our other programs and things, how we spend the money, and see if there's a better way of saving and generating money than it is to hurt the people that cannot do or help themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn? Thank you. Okay. We'll start the council meeting right away. Is that it? With just like a brief.